At the Mother's Day barbecue, I overheard my daughter-in-law tell her sister, "Mother-in-law's moving to a nursing home, and her room's going to be my new gym." She fell off her chair when she found out who actually owned the house. "Deed, I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." Mother's Day was supposed to be a celebration, a day where I could feel cherished after years of giving. Instead, it became the day I discovered just how little I mattered to the people I loved most. The aroma of grilled meat filled the backyard of the home my late husband George and I had built together 40 years ago. I'd spent hours preparing for this gathering, marinating steaks, kneading dough for homemade rolls, and arranging fresh-cut flowers from my garden as centerpieces. At 67, these tasks weren't as easy as they once were, but I wanted everything to be perfect. My son Jason was manning the grill, occasionally glancing at his phone, while my grandchildren played in the yard. My daughter-in-law Caroline was nowhere to be seen. After setting down a fresh pitcher of lemonade, I went inside to retrieve the special apple pie I'd baked using George's mother's recipe. That's when I heard them, voices drifting from the guest bathroom, the door slightly ajar. "The contractor says we can start next month," Caroline's voice tinged with excitement. "Once we get Martha settled in Golden Oaks retirement home, we can finally turn that dreary old bedroom into my home gym." I froze, the pie trembling in my hands. "You don't think it's too soon?" Caroline's sister replied. "I mean, it's only been 2 years since George passed." "Please," Caroline scoffed. "Jason's been more than patient. That house has been in his father's family for generations. It's his inheritance, not hers. Besides, she's becoming forgetful. Last week she left the stove on twice." I hadn't left the stove on. I'd been making bone broth that needed to simmer. "What if she doesn't want to go?" her sister asked. Caroline's laugh cut through me like glass. "She doesn't have a choice. Jason's her only child, her power of attorney. The Sogra is going to the retirement home and her bedroom is becoming my gym. She'll thank us later. She's too old to manage this place anyway." The word Sogra, Portuguese for mother-in-law, dripped with contempt. Caroline had used it behind my back for years, thinking I didn't understand. Her Brazilian heritage was something she only embraced when it suited her. My chest tightened as I backed away. The beautiful pie I'd spent hours making suddenly felt heavy in my hands. I'd become nothing more than an inconvenience, a problem to solve, a body to warehouse so they could claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. I made it back to the kitchen somehow, set down the pie, and gripped the counter to steady myself. Through the window, I could see Jason laughing as he flipped steaks, oblivious to the knife his wife had just plunged into my heart. Was he part of this plan? My own son? When had I become so invisible? After George died, they'd suggested moving in to help me adjust. I'd welcomed the company, grateful not to face my grief alone. But slowly, insidiously, I'd been pushed aside. My recipes were outdated, my opinions old-fashioned, my presence increasingly unwelcome in what had once been my domain. I'd surrendered the master bedroom because the stairs were too much for me. I'd allowed Caroline to redecorate because the place needed updating. I'd stayed silent when family heirlooms disappeared into storage because they cluttered the space. Each small concession had seemed reasonable at the time, each retreat, a way to keep peace. But this, being discarded like outdated furniture? A retirement home where I'd wither away while they claimed the house George and I had poured our lives into? I looked down at my hands, still strong despite the age spots and wrinkles. These hands had held my son when he was born, had nursed. George, through his final days, had maintained this home through decades of life's storms. The doorbell rang. Caroline's voice called out, "Martha, could you get that? My hands are full." I straightened my shoulders, wiped away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen, and moved toward the door. I would smile. I would serve the pie. I would pretend I hadn't heard their plans. But inside, something had shifted. A slow-burning ember of resistance had ignited. They thought they knew everything about me, about this house, about what belonged, to whom. They had no idea what was coming. The week after Mother's Day passed in a fog of betrayal. I moved through the house like a ghost, watching Caroline and Jason with new eyes. Each whispered conversation, each abruptly ended phone call, each meaningful glance between them now carried sinister weight. I couldn't sleep. Night after night, I lay awake in the small bedroom that had once been Jason's childhood room, listening to the creaks and sighs of the house George and I had built together. This house knew all our secrets, had witnessed our triumphs and heartbreaks, and now it was about to witness my eviction. Friday morning, I waited until Caroline left for her yoga class and Jason headed to work before venturing into the attic. The pull-down stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed, my knees protesting each step. The musty air greeted me like an old friend as I fumbled for the light switch. Boxes upon boxes lined the rafters, each filled with memories Caroline had, deemed too cluttered for modern living. I moved purposefully toward the far corner where George's old filing cabinet stood, its green metal dulled with age. My fingers traced the cool surface, remembering how meticulously George had organized our important papers. An engineer by profession, a planner by nature, he had insisted on keeping everything in order. Just in case, he'd always said. The drawer opened with a groan of protest. Inside, labeled folders stood at attention just as George had left them. Taxes, insurance, warranties. And there, at the back, a thick folder labeled property. I pulled it out with trembling hands and sank onto an old trunk. Inside were papers, yellowed with age, the original deed to the land, construction permits, and there, in a sealed envelope, the house title. The memory washed over me like a wave. It had been a rainy Tuesday, 38 years ago. George and I sat in Mr. Peterson's law office, signing the mountain of papers that would make this house officially ours. Now, about the title, Mr. Peterson had said, peering over his glasses. Will this be joint tenancy or tenancy in common? George had looked at me, his expression serious. Put it solely in Martha's name. I'd protested immediately. But George, we're building this together. He'd taken my hand, his eyes never leaving mine. Martha, you're giving up your teaching career to raise our family. You're sacrificing your pension, your professional growth. This house is your security, no matter what happens. Nothing's going to happen, I'd insisted, young and naive, Mr. Peterson had cleared his throat. George is being prudent, Martha. Women often outlive their husbands, and having the house in your name provides protection. From taxes, from probate, from unforeseen circumstances. I'd relented, not understanding then the gift George was giving me, the protection he was ensuring. Now, with shaking fingers, I opened the envelope and unfolded the title. There it was, in black and white, Martha Eleanor Winters, sole owner. A sob escaped my throat, part grief, part relief. George had known. Somehow he had known to protect me, even from our own son. The sound of a car door slamming jolted me back to the present. I hastily returned the title to its envelope and the folder to the cabinet, then made my way down the stairs, wincing at each betraying creak. Caroline's voice echoed through the house. Martha, are you home? I emerged from the hallway, smoothing my hair. Just doing some light cleaning, I lied, surprised by how easily the deception came. Caroline's eyes narrowed slightly. You shouldn't be exerting yourself. Remember what happened last month when you tried to mow the lawn? What had happened was Caroline dramatically overreacting to me using the self-propelled mower on our small yard, acting as if I'd attempted to climb Mount Everest. I'm fine, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Just keeping busy. Well, I've been thinking. Caroline set her designer yoga bag on the counter I'd just cleaned. Maybe we should look into getting you some help, someone to come in a few times. A week. The first step in their plan, I realized. Get me used to caregivers. Make me dependent. Then suggest it might be easier if I moved somewhere with round-the-clock care. That's thoughtful, I said, surprising myself with my calm. But unnecessary. We'll see, Caroline replied with a patronizing smile. Jason and I just want what's best for you, what's best for me. As if I were a child incapable of knowing my own mind. That evening, as I prepared dinner, still my responsibility despite Caroline's claims about my fragility, I watched Jason and Caroline through new eyes. My son, once so like his father, now seemed a stranger. When had he become this person who would discard his own mother? The weight of the title's secret sat heavily in my heart, but with it came something else, a plan beginning to form. They thought they knew everything about this house, about me. They had no idea. 2 weeks after my discovery in the attic, I found myself sitting in my car outside Golden Oaks retirement home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. I hadn't planned to come here. I'd been on my way to the grocery store when a strange impulse had diverted me. The building loomed before me, a modern 3-story structure with a meticulously landscaped entrance. From the outside, it looked pleasant enough. Bright flowers lined the walkway, and cheerful signage promised dignity in your golden years. But I knew what it really was, a place where families stored their inconvenient elders. Is this where they plan to put me? I whispered to myself, my voice sounding foreign in the quiet car. A young couple emerged from the entrance, their expressions grim as they walked to their car. I recognized that look, the weight of guilt mixed with relief. I had worn it myself when we had placed George's mother in a nursing home during the final stages of her dementia. But I wasn't suffering from dementia. I wasn't invalid. I was simply inconvenient. Back at home, I pulled into the driveway and noticed an unfamiliar car parked on the street, a sleek black sedan with a Golden Oaks logo on the door. My heart lurched. They were already here. I entered through the side door, moving silently through the kitchen. Voices drifted from the living room, Jason, Caroline, and a woman I didn't recognize. The private suite would be perfect for Martha, the strange voice was saying. It includes daily housekeeping, 3 meals, and our award-winning activities. Program. And what about medical supervision? Caroline asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. Martha's been so forgetful lately. I clenched my jaw. Another lie. My mind was as sharp as it had ever been. Our wellness team conducts daily check-ins, the woman replied. And for an additional fee, we can provide medication management. The cost is significant, Jason said, his voice hesitant. We can discuss payment plans, the woman reassured him. And of course, many of our residents sell their homes to finance their stay with us. I'd heard enough. I stepped into the living room, making no effort to disguise my presence. Mother! Jason jumped up, his face flushing. We didn't hear you come in. The Golden Oaks representative, a polished woman in her 40s with an artificial smile, stood and extended her hand. Mrs. Winters, what a pleasure. We were just discussing. I know exactly what you were discussing, I interrupted, ignoring her outstretched hand. Planning my future without me. Caroline recovered first, her voice honey-sweet. Martha, we're just exploring options. You know we worry about you being alone in this big house. I'm not alone, I replied coldly. I live with my son and his wife. I turned to the representative. Thank you for your time, but I won't be needing your services. Mother, Jason began, his tone condescending. We should at least listen to what Ms. Hendricks has to say. I fixed my gaze on my son, this stranger wearing Jason's face. No, we shouldn't. This is my home and I'm not going anywhere. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Ms. Hendricks cleared her throat. Perhaps this isn't the right time. I'll leave some brochures for you to review at your convenience. She gathered her materials and made a hasty exit, Caroline showing her to the door. When Caroline returned, her pleasant facade had vanished. That was incredibly rude, Martha. Rude? I laughed bitterly. You want to talk about rude? How about planning to ship me off to a retirement home without even discussing it with me? How about making plans for my bedroom while I'm still in it? Jason paled. What are you talking about? Mother's Day, I said simply. I overheard Caroline telling her sister about your plans for my room. Her gym, was it? Caroline's eyes widened momentarily before narrowing. You were eavesdropping? I was existing in my own home, I shot back. Something you seem determined to prevent. Jason stepped between us, ever the peacemaker. Mom, nobody's trying to get rid of you. We're just concerned about your health, your safety. My health is fine, I insisted. My doctor gave me a clean bill of health last month. My mind is sharp. I don't need to be managed by wellness teams or activity directors. But this house, Caroline interjected. It's too much for you to handle alone. I'm not alone, I repeated. Or at least, I shouldn't be. This house has been my home for 40 years. Every corner holds memories of the life George and I built together. Jason's expression softened slightly. Dad would want you to be safe, Mom. I felt tears welling up but refused to let them fall. Your father wanted many things, Jason. I don't think shipping me off to Golden Oaks was one of them. That evening, after a stilted dinner where Caroline barely spoke and Jason attempted awkward small talk, I retreated to my bedroom. Through the thin walls, I could hear them arguing in hushed tones. She knows, Caroline hissed. We need to accelerate the timeline. I'm not forcing my mother into a home, Jason replied, his voice strained. She can't stay here forever, Caroline insisted. This house is our future, Jason. Your inheritance. Think about the kids' college funds. Their voices faded as they moved. Deeper into the house, but I'd heard enough. The conspiracy was real, and it was moving forward. I needed help. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Hello? A warm, familiar voice answered. Eleanor, I said, my voice breaking slightly. It's Martha. I need your help. Eleanor Wilson had been my best friend for over 40 years. We'd taught at the same elementary school until I'd resigned to raise Jason. While my world had shrunk to the boundaries of motherhood and homemaking, Eleanor had risen to become principal before retiring 5 years ago. She'd never married, instead pouring her formidable energy into her career and a dizzying array of hobbies. We met at Riverside Cafe, far enough from my neighborhood to avoid prying eyes. Eleanor was already waiting when I arrived, her silver haircut in a stylish bob, her posture as straight as it had been in our 20s. Martha, she stood to embrace me, then held me at arm's length, her keen eyes assessing. You look exhausted. I collapsed into the chair across from her. I feel like I'm living with enemies. Over coffee, I poured out everything. Caroline's overheard conversation, the Golden Oaks representative, the arguments, and my discovery in the attic. Eleanor listened intently, her expression darkening. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Have you spoken with a lawyer? She asked. I shook my head. Not yet. I wanted to be certain first, about the deed. Then that's our first step, Eleanor declared, pulling out her phone. My nephew David is an estate attorney. He can verify the deed and advise you on your options. By the time we finished our second cup of coffee, I had an appointment with David for the following day. What about your finances? Eleanor asked as we prepared to leave. Do you have access to your accounts? Your husband's pension? The question stopped me cold. George had handled most of our finances during our marriage, not because he was controlling, but because I'd shown little interest. After his death, Jason had offered to help with the paperwork. I'd been so overwhelmed with grief, I'd accepted without question. I'm not sure, I admitted, shame washing over me. Jason helped me set up automatic transfers for household expenses, but I haven't actually looked at the accounts in months. Eleanor's expression remained neutral, but I could see concern in her eyes. Bring your financial documents to the meeting with David tomorrow. All of them. That afternoon, I waited until Caroline left for her hair appointment before slipping into the home office that had once been George's domain. The desk, his solid oak roll top that had been in his family for generations, was now cluttered with Jason's papers and Caroline's interior design magazines. I began opening drawers, searching for my financial documents. In the bottom drawer, I found a folder labeled Mom in Jason's handwriting. Inside were bank statements, pension information, and a document that made my blood run cold, a power of attorney form with my signature. I remembered signing it, of course. Jason had presented it shortly after George's funeral, explaining it would allow him to help manage my affairs in case of emergency. At the time, I'd been grateful for his foresight. Now I wondered what else I might have signed without fully understanding. I took photos of every document with my phone, then carefully returned everything exactly as I'd found it. As I was closing the drawer, my eye caught on a small notebook wedged at the back. I pulled it out, curious. It was Caroline's handwriting, a list of furniture and household items with dollar amounts next to them. With a sinking feeling, I realized she was inventorying my possessions, assigning values, planning for when I was gone. There, on the third page, antique roll-top desk, $3,000. George's desk. Below it, dining room set, $5,000. My grandmother's table where we'd shared thousands of family meals. They weren't just planning to move me out. They were already dividing up my home like vultures circling a dying animal. I heard a car door slam in the driveway and hastily shoved the notebook back into place, my heart pounding. I had just made it to the kitchen when Caroline entered, shopping bags in hand. Martha! She appeared startled to see me. I thought you'd be napping. Just making some tea, I replied, forcing a smile as I filled the kettle. How was your appointment? Fine. Fine. She waved dismissively, then paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. Were you in the office? Jason mentioned some papers he left on the desk. No, I lied, the deception now coming easily. I've been in the garden most of the afternoon. Caroline nodded, seemingly satisfied, and disappeared upstairs with her purchases. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I needed to be more careful. The stakes were too high for careless mistakes. The next morning, I told Jason and Caroline I was meeting Eleanor for lunch and shopping. Not entirely a lie. Eleanor picked me up and drove us to her nephew's office in a sleek downtown building. David. Wilson was a serious man in his 40s with Eleanor's sharp eyes and analytical mind. He reviewed the photos of my documents, examined a copy of the deed I'd retrieved from the attic, and made notes on a yellow legal pad. The house is unquestionably yours, Mrs. Winters, he confirmed. As for your financial situation, he frowned, tapping his pen against the pad. The power of attorney gives your son significant control, but it can be revoked at any time if you're of sound mind. Which she absolutely is, Eleanor interjected firmly. David nodded. I see no reason why a court would disagree. However, I'm concerned about these account statements. Your pension and Social Security payments are being deposited into a joint account with your son, and there have been significant transfers to another account to which you don't appear to have access. My stomach clenched. How significant? Over the past 2 years, approximately $157,000. The room seemed to spin. That was nearly all of George's life insurance money, funds I'd earmarked for my own long-term care if needed. Can I get it back? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Possibly, David said cautiously. But first, we need to secure what remains. I recommend we open new accounts in your name only and redirect your income sources immediately. By the time we left David's office 3 hours later, I had a new bank account, a revoked power of attorney, and a queasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. The magnitude of what Jason and Caroline had been doing, and what they had planned, was overwhelming. "What now?" I asked Eleanor as we sat in her car in the parking garage. Eleanor's expression was resolute. "Now, my dear, we prepare for battle." The next 3 weeks passed in a strange dance of deception. On the surface, I maintained my role as the increasingly frail mother-in-law, nodding agreeably when Caroline suggested I use a walker just to be safe, accepting Jason's patronizing explanations about household finances with a vacant smile. Meanwhile, beneath this placid facade, I was reclaiming my life piece by piece. Eleanor drove me to appointments with David, who helped me redirect my pension and Social Security payments to my new account. We filed paperwork to formally revoke Jason's power of attorney and began the process of documenting the money he had diverted. "You could press charges," David had suggested during our second meeting. "This is financial elder abuse." The words had made me flinch. Elder abuse. Something that happened to vulnerable strangers, not to mothers at the hands of their sons. "No," I'd decided finally. "I don't want to send my son to jail. I just want what's mine." David hadn't pushed, but I could tell he disagreed with my decision. Perhaps he was right, but I couldn't bring myself to take that step. Not yet. Today, I sat in Eleanor's sunlit kitchen, nursing a cup of tea while she made lunch. Her home was a reflection of her personality: bold colors, eclectic art, and books everywhere. Being here felt like stepping into a different world, one where I could breathe freely. "You can't keep living with them," Eleanor said, slicing a cucumber with precise movements. "It's not healthy." "I know," I sighed. "But where would I go? The house is mine, but they're living in it." "You could sell it," Eleanor suggested, not for the first time. "Buy something smaller, more manageable. Pocket the difference." "That house is all I have left of George," I replied softly. "All those memories, I can't just walk away." Eleanor set down her knife and turned to face me. "Then don't walk away. Make them leave." "How?" I spread my hands helplessly. "They won't just go quietly." "No," Eleanor agreed, a mischievous glint in her eye. "But you have something they want, something they think is already theirs. Use that." I stared at my old friend, a plan slowly forming in my mind. "You mean the house?" "Exactly." Eleanor leaned forward. "They believe they're entitled to it. Use that belief against them." That evening, as I prepared dinner, still my responsibility despite Caroline's claims about my fragility, I considered Eleanor's advice. Jason and Caroline believed the house would eventually be theirs. Everything they had done, moving in, pushing me aside, planning for Golden Oaks, stemmed from that assumption. What if I let them continue believing that? What if I played the role they had cast me in, the declining mother ready to be shuffled off, while quietly preparing my counterattack as, I chopped onions, my eyes watering more from emotion than from the pungent vegetable. I heard Caroline's voice from the living room. "We need to set a date," she was saying, her voice hushed but intense. "Dr. Matthews agreed to sign the competency evaluation. Once that's done, we can move forward with the guardianship." My knife faltered. Guardianship? They were planning to have me declared incompetent? "I don't know, Caroline." Jason's voice sounded uncertain. "Using Mom's doctor like that." "We've been over this," Caroline hissed. "Your mother is declining rapidly. You saw how she forgot to turn off the garden hose yesterday. She left it running for hours." Another lie. I had been watering my rose bushes when Caroline had called me in to take a phone call. A call that never existed. When I returned, she had turned off the hose herself and later blamed me for forgetting it. "Once we have guardianship," Caroline continued, Transferring the house will be simple. Golden Oaks has a 2-month waiting list, so we need to move quickly. 2 months. The timeline was accelerating. I needed to act now. During dinner, I picked at my food, allowing my hand to tremble slightly as I lifted my fork. Both Jason and Caroline noticed. I could see the glances they exchanged, the satisfaction in Caroline's eyes. "Mom," Jason began. "Carefully, we've been thinking it might be time to consider options for the future." "Options?" I echoed, injecting confusion into my voice. "For your care," Caroline interjected smoothly. "As you get older, living independently becomes more challenging. There are wonderful communities specifically designed for seniors." "Oh." I set down my fork, letting my shoulders slump. "You mean a nursing home?" "Not a nursing home," Jason hastened to correct me. "A retirement community, with activities, friends your own age. It would be better than rattling around this big house alone." "I'm not alone," I pointed out. "I have you two." Caroline reached across the table to pat my hand, her touch cold. "We won't be here forever, Martha. Jason and I have our own lives to think about. The children's future." I lowered my gaze to my plate, letting them interpret my silence as resignation. Inside, my resolve hardened like concrete. After dinner, I excused myself early, claiming fatigue. In the privacy of my bedroom, I pulled out the prepaid phone Eleanor had given me. "For emergencies," she'd said, but really to avoid having my calls monitored on the family plan Jason managed. "It's time," I told Eleanor when she answered. "They're planning to have me declared incompetent." Eleanor's sharp intake of breath was the only indication of her shock. "Then we need to move quickly. How soon can you meet with David?" "Tomorrow," I decided. "And Eleanor, I think I know exactly how to handle this." As I explained my plan, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of taking action, of fighting back. For too long, I had retreated, accommodated, surrendered pieces of myself in the name of family peace. No more. Caroline and Jason had underestimated me. They saw only what they wanted to see, a fading old woman, an obstacle to their plans. They had forgotten who I was, who I had always been: Martha Winters, George's wife, a woman who had managed a household and raised a son while supporting her husband's career, a woman who had nursed that husband through cancer without breaking, a woman who owned this house, every brick and beam. It was time to remind them. The day I had been both dreading and anticipating finally arrived. Caroline had arranged what she called a family dinner to discuss my future living arrangements. Eleanor had helped me prepare for this moment, and David had armed me with all the necessary documents, neatly organized in a folder now hidden in my purse. I spent the morning in my garden, tending to the roses George and I had planted decades ago. My hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, still remembered the rhythm of pruning, watering, nurturing. The garden had always been my sanctuary, the place where I felt closest to George. "He would approve," I whispered to a blooming red rose. "He always said I was stronger than I knew." At precisely 6:04 p.m., the doorbell rang. Caroline answered it, ushering in Dr. Matthews, my physician for the past 15 years, now conspiring against me, and a woman I didn't recognize, introduced as Valerie Simmons from Golden Oaks. "Mrs. Winters," she greeted me with practiced warmth. "So lovely to meet you finally." Finally, as if they had been discussing me for weeks. The table was set with our best china, my mother's wedding set that Caroline usually deemed too old-fashioned for everyday use. A bottle of expensive wine breathed in the center, alongside a vase filled with flowers from my garden, arranged by Caroline's hand rather than mine. "Mom," Jason began once we were all seated, his voice gentle as if speaking to a child. "We've asked Dr. Matthews and Ms. Simmons here to help us talk about some changes that might be coming." I nodded meekly, playing my part. Changes? Caroline took over, her voice dripping with artificial concern. Martha, we've noticed some challenges lately. The forgotten stove, the misplaced mail, the incident with the garden hose. Dr. Matthews nodded sympathetically. These can be early signs of cognitive decline, Martha. Nothing to be ashamed of, but something we should address proactively. Golden Oaks has a wonderful memory care unit, Ms. Simmons added, smiling brightly, with trained staff available 24/7. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of containing my anger. They had choreographed this ambush perfectly, these people who claim to care about me. This all sounds very expensive, I said, my voice deliberately quavering. That's something we wanted to discuss, Caroline replied smoothly. We believe selling this house would provide more than enough to cover your care for many years. Selling. My home? I let my voice break on the last word. It's for the best, Mom. Jason reached for my hand across the table. This place is too big, too much maintenance. Think how much easier life would be without all these worries. I withdrew my hand slowly, taking a deep breath. It was time. Before we discuss selling anything, I said, my voice suddenly stronger, I'd like to clarify something. I reached for my purse, pulling out the folder David had prepared. This house belongs to me, solely to me. A confused silence settled over the table. Caroline recovered first, her smile tightening. Of course it does, Martha. No one's saying otherwise. But as part of the family estate, there is no family estate, I interrupted, sliding the house deed across the table. Your father put this house in my name alone when we built it, not jointly. Mine. Jason picked up the deed, his brow furrowing as he read. This must be outdated. After Dad died, nothing changed. My voice grew steadier with each word. Your father wanted to ensure I would always have a home, no matter what happened. Dr. Matthews cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should reschedule this discussion when everyone is feeling more receptive. Actually, Dr. Matthews, I turned to him. I'd like to know why you were planning to sign a competency evaluation without examining me. That seems highly unethical for a physician. His face drained of color. That is. And Ms. Simmons, I continued, Golden Oaks has an excellent reputation. I wonder what the board would think about staff conspiring to commit elderly residents against their will. Ms. Simmons stood abruptly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'll see myself. Out. Dr. Matthews followed quickly, muttering apologies. The front door closed with a decisive click, leaving just the three of us, me, my son, and the woman who had plotted my removal. Caroline's pleasant facade had vanished completely. How dare you humiliate us like that? Humiliate you? I laughed. Softly. By not allowing you to declare me incompetent and steal my home? How inconsiderate of me. Jason stared at the deed, his expression shifting between disbelief and shame. Mom, we weren't trying to steal anything. We just thought... I know exactly what you thought. I cut him off. I heard Caroline on Mother's Day planning to turn my bedroom into her gym once I was safely warehoused at Golden Oaks. Caroline's face flushed. You were eavesdropping. In my own home? Yes, I suppose I was. I turned to Jason. I also know about the money, Jason. The $157,000 you transferred from my accounts. His head snapped up, eyes wide. That was for household expenses, for taking care of you. Save it, I said wearily. David has the bank records, every transfer, every withdrawal. Who's David? Caroline demanded. My lawyer. I savored the word, watching Caroline's expression shift from anger to calculation. He's prepared to file charges for financial elder abuse, unless we can come to an arrangement. Silence fell over the dining room. The china gleamed under the chandelier light. The wine sat untouched. the elaborate dinner Caroline had prepared cooling on our plates. "What kind of arrangement?" Jason finally asked, his voice hollow. "Simple. You have 60 days to find somewhere else to live. You'll repay the money you took. We can discuss terms with David. And Caroline's little inventory of my possessions? That stops now. Nothing leaves this house without my explicit permission." Caroline stood so quickly her chair toppled backward. "This is ridiculous. We've done nothing but take care of you, and this is how you repay us? By throwing us out of our home?" "My home," I corrected quietly. "And yes." Jason reached for Caroline's hand, steadying her. "Mom, please. Let's talk about this reasonably." "I'm being extremely reasonable," I replied. "I'm not pressing charges. I'm not demanding immediate repayment. I'm simply reclaiming what's mine." I stood slowly, gathering my dignity around me like a cloak. "I've made dinner reservations at Marcello's. I suggest you use this time to discuss your options. I'll be back in 2 hours." I walked out, leaving them staring after me. Outside, Eleanor waited in her car, just as we'd arranged. "How did it go?" she asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "Exactly as we expected." My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up with me. "It's done." Eleanor squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Martha." 6 months later, I stood in my garden, watching the autumn leaves spiral down from the maple tree George had planted when Jason was born. The house felt different now. Peaceful, truly mine again. Jason and Caroline had found a condo across town. Our relationship remained strained, but Jason came by once a week, without Caroline, for coffee. He was repaying the money slowly, and with each payment I sensed a small measure of redemption. The upstairs bedroom, my bedroom now, reclaimed from Caroline's decorating excesses, had been restored to the warm, comfortable space George and I had shared. No gym equipment in sight. Eleanor visited often, bringing books and laughter. We were planning a trip to the coast in the spring, something I hadn't done since George fell ill. As I clipped a few late roses for the dining room table, I felt George's presence more strongly than I had in years. "You were right," I told him, arranging the blooms in a crystal vase that had been my grandmother's. I was stronger than I knew. The house around me seemed to sigh with contentment, its walls once again sheltering love and dignity instead of deceit. It had been my silent witness through it all, the happiness, the grief, the betrayal, and finally, the reclamation of my place in the world. My home, my life, my future, however many years I might have left, belonged to me alone. And that was exactly as it should be.